Thank you everyone for waiting. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to Nayan's first Infuse workshop, Carbon Market Introduction and Outlook in Indonesia. So I would like to extend my thanks to our partners, the Indonesia Carbon Trade Association and Dana Ilmu Pengetahuan Indonesia for their support in bringing this event to you today. I'm Vina from Nayan, honored to be your master of ceremony for today's workshop. So before we begin, we would like to invite our collaborating partner, the Head of Investment and Financing of the Indonesia Carbon Trade Association, or IDCTA for short, Pak Robert Satria, to deliver a welcoming speech. So without further ado, the stage is yours, Pak.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to His Excellency, former Indonesian Ambassador to Russia, Professor Rahmat Witoelar, Professor Yatna from DP, Indonesian, Nation Science Fund, and Dr. Dodi. Today, it will mark the official kick-off of workshop on Indonesia's carbon outlook, taking place a pivotal moment in our nation's path towards the low carbon economy. With the recent launch of the IDX by the Indonesian Financial Services Authority and our government's firm commitment to net zero targets, we are on the brink to create a dynamic carbon market ecosystem. I understand that Indonesian carbon market is still at its early stages, but we have much to learn from global advancements and Indonesia's extensive experience in forestry projects. To unlock the full potential of our carbon project, it is essential that we encourage collaboration and knowledge sharing among diverse stakeholders, including government agencies, project developers, and international partners. In this occasion, Nayan Consulting, in partnership with the Indonesian Carbon Trade Association and Nation Science Fund, together with the Yayasan Bina Usaha Lingkungan, is proud to introduce the Infuse Accelerator. This initiative aims to deepen participation in carbon markets across Southeast Asia and support supply chain operators in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. Through these workshops and future capacity building activities, our goals is to deepen our understanding of the global carbon market, to identify challenges and opportunities to Indonesia, is to strengthen collaboration among the key stakeholders, and to develop a pipeline of skilled professionals in the carbon market. By working together, I believe we can create a robust and sustainable carbon market that not only supports Indonesia's climate goals, but also drive economic growth. Last but not least, thank you all for being here, and I look forward to the fruitful discussions and collaborations that lie ahead. Thank you.
So thank you, Pak Robert, for the warm welcoming remarks. Next, I would like to welcome Professor Rahmat Witoelar, the Minister of Environment of Republic Indonesia 2004-2009, who will deliver today's keynote speech. So the stage is yours, Pak Rahmat.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I'd like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to the organizers of this event, and of course, the particular particles of this event, Mr. Yasnain and Riza. And also I'd like to recognize, thank to Robert, the others, and my dear friend, Professor Dr. Yatna. Dodi is my little brother. And all the esteemed guests here, I see there are many experts to whom I would try to explain the difficult things that with carbon trade. I've been asked to talk here as a keynote speaker, and I'm happy that I with the role of a keynote speaker, because as a keynote speaker, I'll offer a key so the others can speak up and do the real business. I've been around on this world for a long time, so I speak from experience, not from expertise, although I've picked up some knowledge along the way. And one thing that I've asked to present as the relationship between climate change and the carbon market, which in my view is very relevant because they're not, it is interlinked and inseparable kind. In the particular position, I am quite obsessed with fighting climate change effects, and with the advent of the carbon market, seems to be we have a glimmer of hope that we can proceed further. Many of us talk about climate change, but not everyone understands fully what it is, what causes it, and how we should solve it. Climate change impact does not only impact the present generation, it impacts the later generation, in fact. And additionally, it threatens the lives of other living organisms, including millions of types of plants, animals of the earth. That's why we need the expertise of Professor Yatna to guide us through the problems befitting the biodiversity on this earth. Moreover, it does not recognize the administrative boundaries of cities, provinces, and countries as well. This climate change is an intergenerational, borderless, and long-term issue. Ironically, human activities have been resulting in excessive greenhouse gas emissions, GHG. A scientific report points out that approximately more than 80% of human enterprises emit emissions. A scientific report points out that more than 80% of human activities have been the culprit responsible for the cause of climate spaces. These include economics, industrial, and lately as well, the political sectors, the wars that Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Palestine are having. Without judging, it does emit very heavy emissions. Dear audience, if we talk about climate change, we cannot talk within a small scope. We need to have a wide global perception. Through the UN body, the Climate Global Organization, known as the United Nations Framework of Climate Conference, Climate Change Conference, was established in 1992. Since then, they convened the Conference of Parties, known as COP, and up to date, it has been 28 COPs by Yatna, Padodi, and many of us visited the COP 28 in Dubai and may be planning to visit again the 29th COP in Baku end of the year. And I want to mention a notable COP event. This is the COP21 held in Paris in 2015 that has produced a historic agreement called the Paris Agreement, resulting now that we are familiar with terms like national greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, NDC, national determined contribution, and the zero emission target of 2050. These terms are born there and will be one of the biggest change is no one can be left behind. So everybody has to participate. Indonesia ratified the UNFCCC in 1994. And the government has been undertaking many actions to satisfy its commitments. The organization of the COP13 Bali that produced the Bali Roadmap is one of Indonesia's proud successes in laying the foundations of global climate change solutions. Paris Agreement essentially refers to Bali COP13 in terms of enhancing the importance of clear mitigation and adaptation actions that must be supported by sufficient funding, technology transfer from developed to developing nations, and capacity building to all. In that respect, as I have pointed out, climate change is a borderless, long-term, intergeneration and cross-governmental issue that would need to be focused activities at local, national, and global levels. It requires a special institutional structure that would take care of the issue on a long-term sustainable basis. A limited governmental ruling period of 5 to 10 years where governments survive maybe in the stages 4 and 8, we have a 5-year plan. It's not sufficient to accomplish this task. When a new government administration takes over, the new officials tend to start everything from scratch, resulting in a lack of continuity. This issue has been observed at both the national as well as the sub-national level. Ladies and gentlemen, to be realistic today, in a few months, the president, the current president, President Joko Widodo will expire, and a new president will take over. It is hoped that the incoming government does establish a clear vision, a clear mission and discourse, managing climate change issues through comprehensive short, long-term development programs. This is crucial because each presidential term, like we are facing now, will shape the country's direction in the future. So do we need a structure, a new structure? There's a question that is being asked, and I would like your opinion on this. That because 30 years after ratification of the UNFCCC, it is time for the upcoming new government to rethink a stronger, credible, sustainable, and dynamic climate change institution with a clear vision and mission for future generations. It has been a complaint that I've been wrestling with, having been to around 15 to 16 COPs every year, including last year and next year. So it has become some kind of obsession for me to visit the COP. the Minister of Environment, although we had the Minister of Environment before it, that I had, before it merged into the Minister of Forestry in 2014, the word climate change has never explicitly appeared as the name of a ministry in Indonesia. A strong and independent institution could unite and mobilize all climate programs and actions, which may be implemented by different stakeholders, including state and non-state actors. Among the main state actors are the energy and transportation, land use change and forestry, the agriculture and industry, and waste, and all of which would need to stay under the close coordination of the President, directly in the President. The new Environment and Climate Change Ministry Agency that reports directly to the President would strengthen Indonesia's position in the climate change negotiations. We have experienced that. One of my past 10 years as a special advisor President for 10 years, but it is not sustainable. So it was dissolved in 2019. So I think a relation like that would strengthen the mission position in the climate change negotiations arena. And to ensure that Indonesia will not only be a passive spectator, but an active actor in contributing to the solution of the climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, it is important to note that today's workshop is very much related to the assurance of climate change funding sustainability. There should be an assurance that sufficient and continuous funding is available for solving the climate crisis. Depending solely on the public shoulders would not be sufficient. It is an active participation from non-state funding sources. Keeping in mind and realizing that Indonesia carbon market potential is huge, it is now depending on us whether we could take advantage of this opportunity or leave it and see other countries, neighboring countries, take the lead in doing this carbon business. As I have commented, you can either use it or lose it. So let us not lose it. So this is why this workshop is very important and could be one of the window of opportunities to help generate a new financial sources for solving the climate crisis in the near future. I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that you will have a very fruitful workshop. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Pak Rahmat, for the warm welcome. As mentioned, with the new government will soon coming, we hope Indonesia will become an active actor in climate change action to the globe. And so for the next session, we would like to introduce Jeremy Buhain from NAYEN, who will provide some information about NAYEN Infuse initiative, give an overview of today's session, and lead a quick activity to get things started. So without further ado, the stage is yours, Jeremy.
Hello? Hello? Yes. Okay, thanks everyone. Just want to personally thank everyone for coming to this event today, and also to the partners that have helped make this happen. And as Fina mentioned, I'll just give a quick overview of Infuse, which is, you might have heard a couple of times already this morning about the word infuse, and give a little bit of an overview about that. an agenda for today to what we expect to deliver to everyone today. And then finally, a short little activity to kind of just get a feeling of what everyone's thoughts are about carbon markets here now, and to see if that changes a little bit after today. I mean, we have a long, I think, road ahead of us in terms of carbon market implementation here in Indonesia. But let's see if today gets us a little bit closer to our objective. Okay, so first, Infuse. And so Infuse Accelerator by NAYAN. And we have this new initiative that we're pushing for. And basically, it's trying to build this ecosystem, a network of practitioners here in Indonesia for carbon markets. And so next slide, please. What do I point it to? Next slide, please. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's just a network of practitioners who, and we want this to sort of be a collaboration between the different entities and companies and stakeholders in Indonesia for decarbonizing the country and the industries, and also participation in carbon markets. And so we look to bring together top-level international carbon market experts, local experts, partners, also communities, of course, especially thinking about carbon markets and all the activities around it to promote a robust carbon market ecosystem. And here we only have a small part of that big network and big community here in Indonesia. So we hope to have this grow, especially knowing that there's a lot of different representation here, and hopefully we can expand that. And some of the activities we're looking to carry out. Next slide, please. So we're looking to support organizations in meeting their emission reductions and participation in carbon markets. We also look to empower organizations to implement successful net zero strategies, attract carbon finance, and become a trusted partner for international clients. And specifically, next slide, please. Some of the activities we're looking to carry out are these periodic public workshops, starting with this one. We have a couple more that we're looking to carry out in the next couple of weeks in August. An online community, local partnerships, and also university outreach. I think we all probably agree that a lot of this has to start when, in terms of the change and the having the young minds to be part of this. And so a lot of the capacity needs to be built from that point on. And so we can build a robust and enabling or enabled sort of community in the future, because we want this to be sustainable and long term. And so before we go into the activity that we have planned, just to kind of give an overview of the agenda, we're going to start with my colleague Johan, who will give a workshop on carbon markets to kind of just set the scene and to get an understanding or get us all on the same page about carbon markets from a high-level perspective. I know he can talk a lot more about the details, but we'll save that for another workshop. And then we'll go into more of an Indonesian context, where we'll have panelists join us from different organizations: DP, IDCTA, University of Indonesia, and WIBUL. And so we're going to try to cover both this morning. And so we're excited to have you here. And of course, at the end, we'll have an opportunity for you to chime in with Q&A, and also when we have the coffee breaks and the lunch later, we will have an opportunity for all of us to convene. And so now for this quiz, quiz sounds like a scary word, but it's really more just it's anonymous, so we're not really going to grade anyone, so don't worry. But please feel free to just scan this code. Oh, well, it's disappeared. Can we get this slide back on? Give people a couple minutes to log in. And then it's really just to get a feel, like I said, of people's perceptions of carbon markets right now in Indonesia. Let's see. I think we can go to the website, actually. If we can share the website. Yes. Yeah. So we also have the screen there. Yeah. We have the code there as well if you'd like to join in. And then let me see how many people we have online already. See how many people have already joined in. Are people able to join for the most part, I think? Yeah? Okay. Maybe I'll give another couple seconds to see if anyone will join in. I'm not seeing how many people are here, but we'll try to just start anyway in a bit. I feel like there should be some music or something. Yes. Okay. All right. So yeah, we can start. I think I'm going to put away the QR code now because I think it might be in the way. Yeah. So the first question is just how familiar are you with carbon market regulations in Indonesia? We have a couple options here, just very familiar, and these levels of familiarity. So very familiar, quite familiar, not very familiar, or no idea at all. I'll give you a few seconds to answer, and then I'll show the responses to see the familiarity in the room. Okay. Okay. Quite familiar. Good to see that no one, there's no one that has no idea. I mean, although of course we would like that to also be welcome in the room to kind of build that capacity. But so here we see that there's a bit of familiarity here. Okay. Next question. How confident are you about the outlook of carbon markets in Indonesia? Hopefully, if we'll see if that changes, or, if depending on where we are with this question in the beginning, we'll see how it changes at the end. Okay, let's see. All right. So it looks like we're still getting some answers. We see that we're kind of split, right, in the middle part here, where some people are quite confident, not very confident. So sometimes we can sort of see that as somewhere in the middle. We have some people that are very confident in it. So maybe we'll hear some insights from them today to maybe convince some of the people that aren't confident and maybe bring them over to that side. Or maybe the people from the other side will bring us over there. But let's see if we can push us towards a higher confidence level. All right. And again, let's see what happens because we'll do this quiz again later to just get an idea of how that changes after today's sessions. Okay, here, what are the most significant challenges do you see for Indonesia's carbon markets? I think you might be able to sort of distribute the points here just to kind of see which ones you think are the most challenging. Okay, we're getting some answers. We see that lack of incentives is right now. Oh, okay, I spoke too soon. It's changing. Okay. Like watching some of those sports events or races when you're trying to see which is going to be on top. But it looks like for the most part, we see that clear rules for participation is coming up as the most significant challenge, followed by lack of incentives, and then community engagement and benefits, a little bit less, and low capacity among players, and then others. I think later on we'll have some opportunity to maybe vocalize some of these from the audience to see what your thoughts are specifically for some of these and what you think we'll need going forward. And I think the last question is, if you're a carbon project developer, how familiar are you with the steps and the requirements for generating and selling carbon credits? So again, as before, very familiar, quite familiar, not very familiar, no idea, or maybe you're not a project developer. Okay, yeah, we're getting a variety of answers. A lot in the sort of the middle field of quite familiar, not very familiar. Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you. Sometimes these things can be very complicated. So hopefully, going forward, that's something we can build along the way as well in terms of capacities for that. Okay. All right. I think that's all for me then. And then thank you again for your participation and thanks for coming and enjoy the upcoming session. Thank you.
So thank you, Jeremy, again for the introduction and explaining the vision and mission of this workshop. And thank you all for the participants to join the interactive quiz that we've already prepared previously with Jeremy. And so for the next session, to move on to our main workshop, which is to create a shared understanding of the carbon market. So this carbon market in Indonesia, as you know, is currently in its early stages of the development, but significant growth is expected to be near in the future. So we would like to think that this would be a great opportunity for us to develop a common understanding of what the carbon market is and how it works. So to provide further explanation, allow me to welcome Johanny Lander, a carbon market expert at NAYEN with decades of experience in carbon market across the globe. So without further ado, the stage is yours, Johan.
Oh, thanks. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Thank you, and I'm very happy to be here. So thank you to all the organizers, and thanks for those introductory words, ministers, professors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to give you a little bit of a helicopter perspective on carbon markets. So while Professor Vitular gave us the key, Jeremy opened the door. With me, we're going inside the building. We're going to take the lift to the top of the building, to the helicopter platform or the sky bar, whatever you want. And then we're going to look from there on the carbon market. I'm not sure. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, go back one. So I'm going to give a very brief introduction on what carbon markets are and how they work, with a quick look at compliance carbon markets. And that is what we are looking at in Indonesia as one part of what we're looking at in Indonesia. But then I will take you to an international outlook. So we will look at Article 6 and also the voluntary carbon markets. And then I think what is one of the key things I want to talk about today is how you link carbon credits to emissions trading schemes and to carbon tax schemes. And then very briefly, a few lessons learned and what we see globally. So next slide, please. So let's start with the basics on carbon markets for those of you who are not that familiar with this. Next slide, please. So as the former minister alluded to, climate change is really important. We need to have collective action. We need to use resources as effective as possible. And one way is to understand this is that climate change is an externality, it's market failure, and to address that, we can introduce public policy. Next slide, please. So that means that cap and trade, emissions trading is one of the methods we can use to address this issue. But before we start with the basic concepts, let's just go back in time and see how did this idea of cap and trade and emissions trading and carbon markets start. Well, it was actually quite a long time ago, and it started in the US, where academics started to think about ways of reducing emissions through trading. And I will not go through the details of this slide, but you see that this already started in the 70s and the 80s. And there was a trading scheme with sulfur dioxide in the US in the 90s. So this is from where this idea comes. And this experience in the US later led to that this was promoted and actually included in the Kyoto Protocol. Next slide, please. So carbon markets is not a new concept. It's not a new policy. It's been implemented in many countries since the early conceptualization. And this slide is absolutely impossible to read. I know that, but you can find it in, for instance, in the World Bank status and trends of the carbon market. I think it's called. But this is just to indicate that globally, carbon markets, emissions trading, and here also carbon taxes are included. They are growing in numbers. So more and more jurisdictions, more and more countries are applying these types of instruments. So you can see in this graph that you have some pre-Kyoto trading. During the Kyoto Protocol period, the European Union emissions trading scheme really took off, and was one of the important schemes that provided lessons learned for others. And after that, we've seen quite a tremendous increase in schemes. And notably, a key one here, of course, is the trading scheme in China, in the People's Republic of China. Next slide, please. So this means that almost the entire world is covered by emissions trading schemes, but also by carbon taxes. And this is an area that is growing in Southeast Asia. So we have Indonesia, we have legislation on the way in Vietnam, in Thailand. We have discussions in Malaysia on a carbon tax or an emissions trading scheme. So it's growing also in this region. Next slide, please. So what is the idea behind carbon markets? The basic idea is that if we can have a price on emissions, if we can have a price on carbon, then that will be a cost for those who emit greenhouse gases. And companies that are facing a price, they will treat this as a cost that they have to manage. So one way to manage that is you pay the price, or you pay the tax, or you reduce your emissions, but thereby lowering the costs of your business. So the whole idea behind carbon markets is the idea of carbon pricing, the concept of carbon pricing, putting a price on emitting greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. Generally, there are two ways of pricing carbon. So one is carbon taxes, and the other one is cap and trade instruments. And we'll not talk about carbon taxes today, so we'll go to cap and trade instruments, or what it's normally also called emissions trading. Next slide, please. Let me know if I go too fast, but I really want to give this overview quite quickly so we can set the scene for discussion about the Indonesian context later. Cap and trade is exactly what it sounds like. It means putting a cap on the emissions. And usually you do this for a sector or economy-wide, but the basic principle of cap and trade is also something that applies for the voluntary carbon market. It means like a company that sets a voluntary net zero target, in a way, sets a cap for its own emissions. So cap and trade is the basic concept behind this. So two basic approaches here. One is the emissions trading schemes. And here you have, like for Indonesia in the coal sector, you have a trading scheme where entities are regulated under a cap, and you trade with allowances. And these can be handed out by the governments or sold on an auction. And we'll come back to more precisely how that works. The other type of cap and trade is the baseline and crediting systems. And this is what we see typically on the voluntary carbon market. The baseline and crediting is not putting a price on emissions. It is rewarding emission reductions. So the approach there is slightly different. The principle here is that the ones that have lower emission abatement costs, the ones that can lower their emissions more cheaply, they should do that first. And that creates carbon credits that someone else can use. In the same way, if you take part in an emissions trading scheme, you are able to reduce your emissions. You can sell that as allowances. I'll come back to that in a second. An important thing here, and I'll come back to that later in the presentation, is that baseline and crediting mechanisms can be used in conjunction together with emissions trading schemes and taxes. Next slide, please. So you can categorize carbon markets in several different ways. One way is to talk about compliance markets. Here you have governments or international regimes providing provisions, regulations, setting a cap. So that this we call compliance markets. And then in an emissions trading scheme, like for the coal sector in Indonesia, it's a compliance allowance market. So you trade with allowances. In relation to that, you can also have, under this compliance scheme, you can allow for the use of carbon credits. So then we can talk about compliance offsets. In these cases, you use carbon credits from sectors outside the trading sector. I'll come back to that as well. And then we have the voluntary carbon market. And this is not regulated by governments. It's not regulated by some overall international regime. The standardization, the coordination, the provisions that are used are based on voluntary initiatives. So that's the voluntary carbon market. And at the end of this session, we'll come back to what this means for pricing, for how prices are set, and what you can get in terms of the money you can get for your carbon credits, basically. Next slide, please. I'm sure some of you recognize this type of figure. It's basically a Mac curve. What policymakers try to achieve with carbon pricing, with emissions trading, is to find a lot of emission reductions, and so that these can be implemented. Emissions trading will not solve all problems. It will not reduce all emissions, because you need other types of policy instruments for emission reductions that are not costly. There are emission reductions that are too costly, that involve very expensive technologies, and that will also not be reached by introducing a carbon price. But between that, there is a space where putting a price on emissions, on carbon, will lead to emission reductions. So carbon markets, emissions trading cannot exist alone. You have to have other policies. It needs to be complemented with other policies to cover the full range of potential emission reductions. Next slide, please. So the benefit of carbon pricing of carbon markets is, of course, that emissions are reduced. Implementing emissions trading schemes also can mean that revenue is generated to the government. It can mean environmental benefits beyond emission reduction, so better air quality, health benefits, etc. And it can support the innovation and development, the whole shift to low carbon investments. So that's sort of the basic concepts of cap and trades. Next slide, please. So next, we'll look a little bit deeper on how these emissions trading works. And now I know a lot of people here already know this, but just to repeat this. In the compliance scheme, the government sets the cap. The government determines how much emissions there should be from a sector or from several sectors or from the economy. And then under that cap, it doesn't matter who reduces the emissions. So a company that has a potential to reduce their emissions in a cost-efficient, let's say in a cheap way, can do that, and they can sell their allowances because they will not need them for compliance. Companies that have much more expensive emission reductions to make, where the abatement costs are higher, they can then buy allowances to cover their emissions. So the government sets the overall cap, but for each installation, they need to have as many allowances as they have emissions, and there can also be caps specified for each installation. So basic idea here, the ones that can reduce emissions first will do that first, and then they can sell the allowances for that as a result of that. And this results in trade. So that's why we need to have a trading platform. Companies can then trade on this platform. Next slide, please. So this again is going to be very brief. The government can set a cap. So for instance, it can be, let's say, 20 million tons over a 5-year period, so that every year the sector should not emit more than 20 million tons. In many schemes, you have different things that affect this cap and how it's implemented. The more stringent the cap, the more higher the prices. So if there's not a stringent cap, then companies do not need to reduce their emissions, and there's not going to be a demand, and we're not going to have a high price. If you have a stringent cap, companies need to reduce their emissions, and some of those who can't, they need to buy allowances or carbon credits, and there will be a higher price on those units. Now, there are things here, of course, that affect a cap. I'll just mention a few here. One thing is, of course, that if you have an emissions trading scheme or you have a cap, and that is based on, the cap is maybe set on historical emissions or projections. And then suddenly you have a real decline in GDP growth. So companies do not emit at all as much as before. Okay, so then that would mean that the cap no longer is very stringent. It may lead to lower prices. And this is, for instance, what happened in the European Union emission trading scheme earlier, like 15 years ago during the financial crisis. Another thing that can happen here is that the government introduces other policy instruments, renewable certificates or subsidies or other instruments that make companies reduce the emissions. And since emissions are reduced, companies would need less allowances, and again, the prices may go down because the cap is not longer very stringent. So these are things that can impact a carbon market and emissions trading scheme. You can also have governments regulating, for instance, it can be possible to bank allowances. So you can, from 1 year to another, or from one 5-year period to another 5-year period, you can keep your allowances and use them in the next period. You can also, in some cases, borrow from a future period. The government can also allow carbon credits from sectors outside the emissions trading scheme. So all these things need to be considered when the government sets the cap. All these things will impact the price in the emissions trading scheme. And we'll see how this develops in Indonesia and what exactly the rules that are coming for the future in the future ETS in Indonesia. Next slide, please. How are we on time, Jeremy? Okay, so far so good. Yeah. Just a quick examples of how this has been working in practice. So here's an example from Canada, and this shows, again, without going into any details here, that the government has tried different policies, but what actually reduced emissions the most in Canada for a given period of time was carbon pricing. Next slide, please. And the same was done for, I'm sorry, I forgot which country this is. But it's a case from another country where you also see that emissions are reduced. You have several types of different policies, but the key instrument for reducing emissions in this country also is the carbon pricing. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that was a bit quick introduction to the compliance market and how that can work on a developed in a domestic market. For some of you here, you're project developers, you want to develop carbon, you want to generate carbon credits, and you want to sell them on the market. If we're looking at opportunities, we also have international opportunities. So let's now turn to international carbon markets. And here we have Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. The Article 6 of Paris Agreement sets up, I would say, like an accounting framework. It provides like a basis for a cap and trade system, but it's in a way not a cap and trade system. If you compare with the Kyoto Protocol, in the Kyoto Protocol, the developed countries, the OECD countries, had targets, and they got the possibility to trade between themselves to achieve those targets. So under the Kyoto Protocol, the international trading was a cap and trade scheme. It was an emissions trading scheme. And then it also allowed the clean development mechanism to provide carbon credits to those countries with targets. That's an example of how you increase the cap. The Paris Agreement is a bottom-up scheme. So there's no it's it's not like under the Kyoto Protocol where you had a bubble, you had a cap for the OECD countries that needed to be reached. Here, every country puts out their own targets, and the trading here starts on a bilateral level. So you agree with another country that we will trade carbon credits. The Paris Agreement, Article 6, have 3 sections. So the first is Article 6.2. This is referred to as cooperative approaches. And the basic idea here is that countries cooperate so that one country can sell carbon credits to another country. Do you know where the idea or the basis for this approach comes from? This is basically the JCM idea, because Japan pushed for this type of an open framework for collaboration without a lot of oversight or supervision from the UNFCCC. So this came, the forerunner of this was the joint crediting mechanism of Japan. The other part of Article 6 is what is now called officially the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism. And this is replacing the CDM. It's very similar to CDM, but there's some significant differences also. But this is a government. So this is a UNFCCC government mechanism that will generate carbon credits. Then you have, under Article 6, you also have something called non-market approaches. And why is there non-market approaches here? Well, it's because some countries under the UNFCCC, they don't like markets. So you need to have something non-market that has the same status or the same importance at the COP level as the minister was talking about, or at the UNFCCC. So that's why this Article 6 have these 3, you might think not very related, but yeah, it's a bit strange, but that is the outcome when 109 countries have to agree on something. You have a bit of a weird outcome sometimes. Next slide, please. The difference between trading for, that's a lot of echo again, right? Yeah. The difference between developing countries' participation in carbon markets under the Paris Agreement compared to the Kyoto Protocol is that developing countries also have targets now. And that has a significant impact on trading. So it means that if you export carbon credits from Indonesia to another country, that will be accounted toward in Indonesia's NDC, because Indonesia cannot simultaneously account those emission reductions. So this has led to a discussion of what can we do under Article 6 and what has to be remain or have to remain under the voluntary carbon market without this NDC accounting. And we can come back to that a little bit. The Article 6 rules is not like you have to prepare a lot of things and then get approval and then you can start trading. You prepare your national arrangements, etc., and then report to the UNFCCC how you've done this. But compared to CDM, participation in Article 6 requires more institutional capacity, more regulation from the host country side. And we also see that in the regulations of Indonesia, especially the one from 2022, that Indonesia is regulating the participation in Article 6. Next slide, please. And to participate in Article 6, Indonesia has to be, of course, a party to the Paris Agreement. But important here is that it has arrangements in place for authorization of internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, ITMOs. And that authorization is key because that is when Indonesia says that I'm not going to use these emission reductions for my own NDC, someone else can use them. So this authorization procedure is very important. Then the country needs to have arrangements for tracking the ITMO. So that means access or having a registry. And there's also then reporting requirements attached to this. Next slide, please. Very quickly, what are the opportunities here? Well, if we look at this from the Article 6.2 perspective, countries cooperating through bilateral agreements. Globally now we have 86 bilateral agreements. There's 11 buyer countries, so not an enormous amount of countries, but it includes Japan, Switzerland, Sweden, Norway, Korea, Singapore, and a couple of more countries. 44 host countries. Yeah, something missing there, but 140 projects are listed at whatever stage, early stage or more advanced stage, but totally 140 projects expecting to result in the transfer of ITMOs. 119 of these are JCM projects, so under the joint crediting mechanism. And this is where Indonesia and Japan also have a cooperation, of course. So this is one source of demand. You have bilateral agreements, you have countries they want to buy. You also have countries that set up bilateral agreements to facilitate for companies to buy. So we'll come back to that. Another main source of demand is the CORSIA, which is the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. So international aviation and the emissions of that is not covered by the country's NDCs or their greenhouse gas inventories. So this is something outside. So here the sector has agreed to set a cap on their emissions, and airlines have to compensate for their emissions. The requirement here is that the carbon credits that the airlines can use, they have to be authorized under Article 6.2. So that's a requirement. So here's from where you can see possible demand come now and in the future. Next slide, please. Let's take a quick look at voluntary carbon markets before we go into the final section also. Yeah, as mentioned before, the voluntary carbon market is not regulated by governments. Companies, organizations, they set voluntary targets, climate neutrality or net zero. Don't ask me to explain the difference now, maybe I can do later. And this is typically based on a supply in developing countries, and the buyers are primarily in the developed world. But this is changing a little bit. Next slide, please. We'll skip this one, take the next. So just to give you an idea of what is happening here, the voluntary carbon market had a strong growth from 2017 and up to 2021. And why is that? Well, two reasons. Of course, a greater interest for companies to set net zero targets and to achieve those through carbon credits from the voluntary carbon market. But here was also a sort of a regulatory gap because 6 was not in place. The rules for Article 6 was not in place until 2021. And after this hike in 2021, the trading in the voluntary carbon market has reduced a little bit. And I'm not sure you can read on the screen, but an average price on this market is about $6 per ton. Next slide, please. And to make this voluntary carbon market work, there needs to be an ecosystem of actors. And those who play a key role here are, of course, the independent carbon market programs or standards that generate the carbon credits. By generating, I mean that you have the possibility here to validate the project and to get the emission reductions verified. And the key one here is the Verified Carbon Standard, VCS or VERA. And the second is Gold Standard, and then you have a set of standards that have a little bit less volume of trade. Then, of course, you need to trade the carbon credits, and you can do that over the counter. So you just agree with the project developer that sells carbon credits, and you just have that as a bilateral contract. But you also see here the emergence of trading platforms, and we have now the one in Indonesia, we have one in Malaysia, we have one in Singapore. So these are emerging in every country. Next slide, please. An important discussion on the voluntary carbon market has been the quality of credits, and various attempts to address this, and one has resulted in the establishment of independent bodies that have put down guidance for the standards that generate carbon credits. And one thing that is important now is that the ICVCM has developed core carbon principles and programs, the standards, ICPs, as I mentioned before, that fulfill those principles. They can then get a certificate that, yes, we fulfill these requirements. And here we have high integrity carbon markets and with of good standard. That's very briefly the voluntary carbon market. Next slide, please. And finally, the final few minutes, I'm just going to mention the relation between emission trading schemes and tax schemes on the one hand, and carbon credits on the other hand. So next slide, please. The carbon markets, different types of carbon markets and different types of sectors can be linked. And this is a very basic picture, but in this one, you see that there's an emissions trading scheme, and here we have the energy sector. Then we have sectors that are not part of the emissions trading scheme. It says a domestic carbon market, but this here refers to that these sectors can generate carbon credits that can be used in the emissions trading scheme. We also see here an example that the sector, energy sector, that is covered by the ETS, they can buy international carbon credits. So that's also one possible link between different carbon markets. And the sectors, in this case here, you see industry, agriculture, forestry, etc., they can export carbon credits to the international market. So these different markets can be linked. So what you see here all can be in the compliance market. In addition to this, you can have trade on the voluntary carbon market. So next slide, please. I'm not going to go through this, but this is just to show you a number of countries that have this opportunity for project developers to develop carbon credits and sell them from the sector outside the emission trading scheme or tax scheme to be used in the compliance scheme, in the ETS or in the carbon tax scheme. So you see here we have California, we have China. Before we had EU ETS, but not now. Next slide, please. We have Kazakhstan. We have Korea, we have Mexico, we have New Zealand. Next slide, please. And then we have a very interesting example. And this is why Singapore has a bilateral agreement with Indonesia. Because they do, right? Not yet, but it's coming, no? Hopefully. Okay, but this is, and this is why, because Singapore has a carbon tax. We can go to the next slide. We're running out of time. Next slide, please. So it has a carbon tax. So some facilities have to pay a carbon tax. They have a cost for emitting. Now, of course, to reduce that cost, they can reduce emissions. But Singapore has also said that you can also use ITMOs, you can use carbon credits to offset that tax. And in this case, since Singapore wants to achieve its NDC, it wants to achieve its national climate target, then it wants, if companies import carbon credits, Singapore wants to be able to count those carbon credits towards the NDC. That means that this has to take place under Article 6. So that's why Singapore is signing these bilateral agreements with a number of countries so that you have a framework for import of ITMOs from countries like Indonesia to Singapore. And in this case, it's not a government buying. Singapore here is facilitating for the companies under the tax compliance scheme to purchase ITMOs and use them towards their tax. So that's why we have these kind of agreements with that Singapore is working with. Next slide, please. Yeah, next. Just a couple of examples. South Africa introduced a carbon tax and also allow for carbon credits from within the country. So here it's not ITMOs, it's any type of carbon credit that can be used. Next slide, please. And another example is Colombia. What they say from Colombia is that when they opened for this opportunity in 2016, 2017, there was, it provided a great opportunity for nature-based solutions projects to provide carbon credits to this scheme. So that created a boost for project developers for projects in the nature-based solution sector. Next slide, please. I'm almost done, but this is something that I just want to show you that relates to the prices. And this is just a theoretical example. It's a theoretical example. So what are the lines here? The top blue line is the allowance price for a tax in a compliance scheme. That's what entities are paying in this country. It's an imaginary country. So they have a tax that are at this level and increasing a bit, or it has an ETS where this price, it's also increasing a bit, but it's set by the market. The red line you see below that, what is that? That is an example of what can happen if you allow carbon credits from other sectors or from abroad to be used in the scheme. In this case, you think that why are those carbon credits not given the same price as the allowances? Well, typically, a company cannot use more than maybe 5 or 10% of carbon credits for its compliance. It has to use 95% allowances. So that reduces the possibility of using carbon credits. That's why there's typically a little bit of a discount on those prices. Then you have the red line also increasing a bit. And you have a bottom line I think in dark blue. These are typical, I mean, these are not real prices, it's just examples, but The curve at the bottom is a low price. And why is that? That's because the buyer here enters in a project at a very early stage. And here the seller wants to have certainty that there is a buyer. Maybe the buyer helps with the project development costs, helps to generate the carbon credits. So therefore they sign an agreement, they make a contract early on saying that, okay, we would just pay $3 or $4, but we signed the contract now. So the thing here is that the buyer takes a lot of risk because the buyer doesn't know, will there ever be any carbon credits at all? The project developer has some certainty because he or she knows that will be a price, not very high, but there will be I will get paid something. The red line is an example of a little bit less risk. So this could be when the project developer has a registered project. So the project is more developed, the risk that it will not happen is less. So you can sign an agreement of a price that is a bit higher. And all these lines under the blue line, except for the green, are sort of prices relative to the allowance price. In this case, we're talking about a compliance scheme. So the prices are set depending on the risk. But the idea here is for these carbon credits to enter a compliance market. The blue line and the red line at the bottom are often referred to as the primary market. So here we sign a contract as we are the first one to sign a contract. The carbon credits are not yet issued, so therefore there will be a low price. The line under the blue line, under the allowance price, is then called the secondary market price, because then the carbon credits are already issued, there's not a lot of risk. So who makes the money here? Well, obviously, the buyer that buys at high risk for $3 and then sell at the secondary market for, I don't know, $15. That company will make some profit. And of course, the compliance entity, the coal company that buys with high risk at an early stage to hedge its position on the market, also saves a lot of money by doing that. In reality, there's a mix here. So companies have different strategies. And what you see in the countries where you have carbon credits being used in an allowance scheme, you can have a fixed price, but you can also have a relative price. So a trading contract can be that the buyer says that, okay, we'll pay 80% of the allowance price for the next 5-year period. And for the period, the 5 year after that, we'll pay 85% of the allowance price. So this is the case where you get carbon credits into a compliance scheme. Finally, the green line here, it reflects the $6 price, US dollar price on the voluntary carbon market. Now, this is not entirely true, because if you have a high quality project and a good story that someone is willing to pay for, you can get $20. But just an example, and my point here is that if you can link the use of carbon credits from forestry or for agriculture, and you can use them in an emissions trading scheme or for carbon tax, then there will be a boost for demand, and you will also be more certain about the prices that are there. Have I got 1 more minute? Great. So that was the linkage between compliance schemes and carbon credits. So next slide, please. So very quickly, just a few lessons learned and global trends. There's a lot to say about lessons learned from existing schemes. There's a lot to say about the global trends. And this is this is just a general point about the linkage between the interdependence of the ETS or tax scheme, not the tax scheme, sorry, the ETS with other policies. So I think it would be interesting in Indonesia to see how the ETS develops and how it interacts with the policies for renewable energy, the initiatives for energy transition, etc. And next slide, please. When we look at domestic emissions trading schemes, we've seen that prices tend to vary quite a lot. So there is a tendency for governments to regulate the price. The market still sets the price, but government can set the floor price, deciding that prices for an allowance should not be less than this. They can also set the ceiling price, saying that the price should not be higher than this. We see more and more that, as is the case of Singapore, we see the case where carbon tax schemes are integrated with emissions trading schemes. And Indonesia is also an example of that. And we also see that when you develop emissions trading schemes in this region, in Asia, the trend is that you do not allow for international offsets. You allow for offset for carbon credits from other sectors within the country to create flexibility for the trading sector in the country. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is also related to compliance schemes, but I think a key point here is that the design of an emissions trading scheme is very important, and an emissions trading scheme or a carbon tax or an integration of ETS and tax is a long-term engagement. So I'll stop by saying that. I think then we're almost on time. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that even though this was quite a fast run through, that gave you a little bit of this helicopter perspective on the carbon market. So let's take the elevator down again.
So thank you for Johan for explaining sort of carbon pricing market in Indonesia and international schemes in here. And now next sessions we will have a 10 minutes coffee break. And for the material presentations from Johan and Jeremy previously, we shared them through. Can you share some screen? We've shared some presentations that you can download. Maybe Ms. Abi, you can. So after this, we will have a 10 coffee break for 10 minutes, and we'll be back at 10:50. So thank you. Okay, never mind. Sorry, I was. Sorry, I think I mistake pronunciation there. We will be back at 10:50, not 30. Thank you. tes 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 tes. Tes tes. So I would like it will be like 10:50 now, and we would like to start in a few more minutes after the participants will coming in. Pak Robert mau masuk lagi, Pak? Terima kasih ya. Ya ampun, kalian masuk aja kayak udah nggak ada. Kalau yang moderatornya aku aja.
Moderator aja.
Oh, iya.
Yeah, I'm open.
Okay. Tes, tes. Di langsung sini aja, Bu. Ibunya nunggu di sini aja. Ah, enggak, nanti di sini lagi. Aduh, gimana sih, Mbak? Tutup lagi. Okay. So I hope you enjoy the coffee break. So our next session will be the focus group discussion about the overview, outlook, challenges, and opportunities for the current and future Indonesian carbon market. So for this focus group discussion, it will be moderated by Bu Ayu Pratiwi from the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, or Area for Short. And the interesting panelists will be coming from Pak Riza Suwarga, the chairman of IDCTA, Bapak Dodi Sukadri from the University of Indonesia, Bu Yani Wicaksono from Yayasan Bina Usaha Lingkungan, and Professor Yatna Supriyatna, the executive director of DP. And so, Bu Ayu, Pak Yatna, Pak Riza, Bu Yani, Prof. Yatna, and Pak Dodi, the stage is yours.
Okay, welcome back. I hope that after we have scrumptious quick coffee break, we are already refreshed and ready for having a focus group discussions. I know we're a little bit running over time, but let's try, let's do our best to meet a time limit. And because we are having a very inspiring, amazing panelists here for the carbon market introduction and outlook in Indonesia by the Infuse Kickoff Workshop. Carried out by NIEN, IDCTA, and DP. So for the panelists, we have the first speaker will be Professor Yatna Supriyatna, Executive Director of DP or Dana Ilmu Pengetahuan Indonesia or Indonesia Science Fund. Professor Yatna is a researcher, observer, and activist for the environment and conservation. I'm going to briefly introduce our speaker, but actually their expertise, their achievement is very, very long and very lengthy. So this is only a brief introduction. In 2012, Professor Yatna was appointed by President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono as a member, and then in 2023 as chairman of the Basic Science Commission of the Indonesian Academy of Science. And in 2021, he was appointed by the Indonesian Academy of Science as Executive Director of the Indonesian Science Fund and Chairman of the Basic Science Commission. And then for the second speaker, this is not in order, I'm just following the agenda. We have Dr. Dodi Sukadri. He is a forester. He was the former coordinator of the National UN Climate Change Learning Partnership project in Indonesia and successfully led the development of Indonesian National Climate Change Learning Strategy. Dr. Dodi has then worked as a low carbon development advisor for Indonesian National Council on Climate Change. He is a senior advisor currently at the Institute for Sustainable Earth Resources at Universitas in Indonesia. And then the third panelist, please bear with me. We have Dr. Riza Suwarga. He is the chairman of Indonesia Carbon Trade Association. He is the initiator of Saving Our Tomorrow, an initiative to make Indonesia the prominent savior of the earth through pipeline of carbon projects. His experience managing large-scale forestry and carbon projects, among others, are sustainable forest management in Merauke, Papua, to restoration and conservation of Sumatra Marang peatlands in Musi Banyuasin in South Sumatra. And then, of course, last but not least, we have Ibu Yani Wicaksono, the Executive Director of Yayasan Bina Usaha Lingkungan. Ibu Yani is an expert green business, particularly on energy. She obtaining a Master of Art from International Development Economics, Yale University in 1996. She dedicated her career to renewable energy in Indonesia, starting as a consultant on many international and national green projects. Currently, she is one of the global environmental facility or small grant program National Steering Committee, also activists in the communities, include as a founder of the Indonesia Renewable Energy Society, the Indonesian Solar Energy Association, the Indonesian Biomass Energy Association, to name a few. Okay, without further ado, I suggest that we have around 10 minutes presentation for each speaker, and then let's have a round of questions from the distinguished guests and participants. Okay, for Professor Yatna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So the presentation, it's basically as requested by Pak Riza. I have my colleague at the University of Indonesia, Research Center for Climate Change, Pak Riko Wahyudi, who's always involved with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So that's why I think the ideas coming from him, because he has been involved for years in the development of this market, carbon markets, and so on. So next slide. So this is the next slide. Maybe it's very complicated. It's about the development of how the economic value carbons, So starting with the President Decree 2021, number 98. So what you call it, the NEK, Nilai Ekonomi Karbon. Then from there is many new regulation by many different ministry. For example, here is the Ministry of Energy, and also Marves and OJK, and also the President Decree again in very recently about the carbon capture and storage, CCS and CCUS, and also of course the carbon burst. So that was really the stages of the first, how that starting this carbon. From there, you can see the regulation issued by Minister of Environment and Forestry. So you can see the Permen LHK about the procedure for carbon trading and forestry sectors. So it's already there. Plus also the roadmap for carbon trading in forestry sectors. Also the greenhouse gas emission reduction certification scheme. And also the Director General on the methodological framework for calculating emission reduction and removal in FOLU sector, forest and land use. And under that, there is also complicated because of this process regulation. Currently, there is also the Minister of Home Affairs. And then because they're going to be involvement of the local government, but also the preparation for fiscal substance on financing from the Minister of Finance. So you can see even, and now is in the process also regulation on the implementation of national NDC plus the procedure carbon trading in international market. So there's a very interesting that regulation. if you see the draft, the left side, what the draft now is still there. Implementation of Indonesian volumetric 2020 to support NEK, zero waste, plus the regulation for implementation NEK on the activities on each sector of the government. So all the status is still in harmonization. That's the government, but also waiting for further discussion. That's very interesting, right? So that's so complicated. So Pariko is my staff at the Research Center for Climate Change. He is now working with the ministry to really understand what the context is. So next slide. I hope it's not very complicated, more complicated. Here is of course, the carbon trading economic value. That really what already Johan already mentioned about this RBP, result-based payment. I think because Indonesia, received the money, from Norway for RBP programs, but has not been in the emission trading system, ETS, and also the emission offset, plus carbon tax. If we still have that discussion, hopefully by 2025, they're going to start with that. The next slide is the milestone. What is the milestone of this one? You can see that this carbon burst or carbon is, you can see that from the beginning with the Minister of Finance first. How that the Minister of Finance, the law number 23, 2023, about this the finance, and then after that there is MOU between OJK and KLHK regarding the carbon burst, plus OJK plus surat edaran, which is that really OJK September, and plus kerjasama OJK and KLHK. And the last one is, that's why launching of carbon market to 26 September to 2023. So that's really the milestone, the establishment of the carbon markets. The next slide. So this is what it's really the carbon road. It's phase 1 up to now, 2024. Phase 5 to 2030. And phase 3, it's about 2027 to 30. It's a little bit long way, but because of so complicated on the ministry and so on, that's why we really, sorry. I hope not. That's why I said. Okay, so this is the roadmap. Why is that? I think if you can see that, of course, what the achievement 2024, that's really already there, except that the trading system phase 1 still that waiting for fine tuning, I guess. And then the 2025 will be the coordination. That's the key words. The coordination of and evaluation of the institution and how that they improve the carbon trading platform. And that's really important because otherwise that really without coordination, local government, central government, business, and so on and so on. So, of course, little bit late. Next slide. Because it's only 10 minutes, so I have to little bit run. The ecosystem carbon trading in Indonesia, as you can see that, how that from the primary market to the secondary market. So all is centered to the system registration national registry system. So everything, right, related to minister, international standard, everything, it's really one, what you call it, the key is that every day has to be registered in the SRN, right? The next slide. Here is the emission reduction clarification. And this is what you call it from the certification, integration, plus methodology, plus MRV. So everything is there. For example, you can see here the stages of the certification from the general data to drum, to the data itself, and then who is verified, what that the scheme, and then up to the last one is how the MRV works. So also you can see that who is accredited by what you call it, the lembaga verifikasi validasi, dan this is a 4 lembaga, which is Sukovindo, PT Nuf Nord, and so on and so on. Plus the methodology, the very interesting methodology. 40 methodology is regularly recognized. For energy sector, mostly is the 23. For forestry sector, is only 5. And for waste, it methodology, and so on and so on. I think the methodology is very important because we not recognize the FERA. So what we have to do is we have to develop by ourselves. So that's really important. I think they really need scientists to be there, or maybe consultant who can help how that the methodologies. This is very important because Indonesia want to have new methodologies. Yeah. Progress on carbon trading here. You can see that already 262 proponents and have received general data and approval from SRN Secretariat, 259, and then submitting drafts already, it's 98, 7 proponents, 4 proponent preparation, 4, and then the already sell is 3 proponent. Those are Lahendong, mostly on energy, and plus with the CDRAP, and the third one is the PLTU, So most of those are energy. I don't see any forest land use yet. Yeah. So that was really the one that. And here is an example of what we have the trading transaction. I think it's not enough time for the 10 minutes. So I like to change this. Next slide. Next slide. So this is really the high persetujuan teknis batas atas. Yeah. Cap and trade. The caps is already there. I think that, but that mostly for the energy sectors, caps. So I don't see on the forestry and other sectors. So the next slide. Next slide. Here is the President Directive in the launch of the Indonesian carbon burst. It is estimated that approximately 1 gigaton of CO2 carbon credit can be captured with potential value about, well, that's too big. But that's really the president said. This represents the potential of our carbon exchange, new economic opportunity that is sustainable and environment friendly. It is recommended the international carbon standard be established as a reference point. It is recommended that technology be employed to ensure the effectiveness and efficiency of transaction, establishing target and timelines. And also it is recommended, this is very important, voluntary carbon market be organized and facilitated according to international best practice. So that's really the important part, Riza. So this is current status. Next slide. So Indonesia has already built the carbon exchange or carbon burst, but there is no cap and trade mechanism yet, or emission trading system to create domestic market and from demand side, and how that really related to the international markets. Standard and methodology that still need be strengthened in SRN, particularly in volume sectors, because that's really the important thing. Looking at the possibility of linking with the other ETS, international carbon trading under Article 6 mechanism of Paris Agreement, as mentioned by Johan before, and the role of local government is still limited. What that's really in the carbon market, what the rules of the local government. So I guess that's 10 minutes, right? Thank you. But before that, let me a little bit 1 minute to introduce what the Indonesian Science Fund. There's a recommendation too, but so Indonesian Science Fund, Bapak Ibu, is why I'm working with Pak Riza. Is Indonesian Science Fund is the president decree to develop the fund for doing research. And this is under the Indonesian Academy of Science, and really like a hub, not only giving money to the researchers, but also to make sure that science is a very important play in the development and also in the policy for the future Indonesia. So that's why I think we are really happy that finally Pak Riza can, IDXCA can really work with us and how we can. Before that, we already almost every 2-week discussion here in many different issues, but most of them are environment, social issue, and many others. So this opportunity, that's why we have a hub so that everybody can have coffee and outside of the rooms. Thank you, Bu Ayu, for listening, and I'm really that very short and hopefully, but we can really in a good discussion during this after the presentation. Thank you.
Can we have a round of applause? Yeah. Thank you so much, Prof. Yatna. I cannot help myself to follow up you on, the term that you use in your presentation on harmonized and in discussion for carbon market situation in Indonesia. But let's keep it later on for Q&A. Let's now hearing a presentation from Dr. Riza. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mbak Ayu. 10 minutes. Let me just make it very quick. So, Prof. Yatna already eloquently explained about how complicated our regulation is. But I can, positively, I can say, this is sending a signal to the market that Indonesia is very serious. So let's take that, because I haven't seen any other countries that spend so much time issuing presidential decree and all regulation like Indonesia. So I think that's a positive one. So let's make it work. That's the key. So first of all, I think because Pak Yatna already explained quite detail, I'm not going to repeat, but I'm just going to comment on things. That's number one. Number two, I would like also to introduce IDCTA, Indonesia Carbon Trade Associations. It's just a little bit over 2 years old, very young, but our members are quite expensive now. We have Pertamina joining, PLN joining, and of course the legacy projects also part of us, and new developers also, because we have I think one member also here, Pak Handoko. I don't know if I've seen him. There he is. There he is. So he's also going to be the next Elon Musk of carbon, of Indonesia. So you better ask his business card later on and ask questions. So next slide, please. We have our milestone or monumental event called Carbon Digital Conference. We had that quite successfully in Bali last year, attended by almost 300 participants. Most of them are investors, off-takers. So despite of all the anxiety and sometimes nervousness of the investors, fortunately they're willing to come to Indonesia and still have high hopes. Maybe thanks to all of us in IDCTA. These are the companies that attended. Next slide. And yeah, here are the representative of the countries and cities, almost 50 countries, almost 50 places. Next, maybe I could just go on with the last slides. These are some illustrations of what's happening there. Very exciting. 86 speakers, only 18 from Indonesia, the rest are coming from all over the world. Next. Here is, I think, what Pak Yatna mentioned, that Indonesia want to explore and invent its own methodologies and standards. So probably we need another 20 years to make it happen, because I think a lot of standards already, 170 carbon credits already in the market. I think we account maybe couple dozens of standards already in the market. A lot of advices come to us saying, please, if you want to make it happen, just follow the best practices, don't reinvent the wheel. And this is what the IDCTA has done. We signed joint task force with Vera. On the side is the former CEO of Vera, David Antonioli. He came down to Jakarta showing how serious they are. So what the purpose of our joint task force is, there are three things. Number one, we want to harmonize the standard. We prepare the alignment of the registries. And of course, we want to make synergies between the VVBs or the LVV, like Pak Yatna said, which is the validators. There are only 4 validators right now registered in SRN. I think there are more than 30 validators in Vera Gold Standard and other standards. Next, please. This, just quickly, these are some of the activities that we had. Next, just keep on the pictures. U.S. Embassy came to our office. Mas Dias Hendro Priyono also come to our office. Next, because showing a lot of enthusiasm about carbon credit. And Of course, this is PBNU also is very interested, and Muhammadiyah also, but it's not in the picture. We don't want to take sides, so everybody is welcoming and joining the whole. This is on the launching of Indonesia Carbon Exchange, like you said. On the right side, you know, Pak Mahendra Siregar is the chairman of OJK. Next. So this is the milestone of our event, starting from biogas workshop that we hope to conduct next month, and we just signed and agreed on the ASEAN Carbon Alliances last week. Hopefully, ASEAN Carbon Market Association will sign an MOC, we call it, Memorandum of Collaboration, in Baku, Azerbaijan, COP29. But I don't know if I get the ticket though, because I think it's so difficult. Baku is a little bit challenging. It's a bit smaller than the event in Dubai last year. So yeah, finger crossed. Hopefully we can make it there. And we just had our Corsia workshop a few months ago with Director General of Civil Aviation and also the WC. And yes, we have a roadmap, a road to CDC 2024. We're going to have another Carbon Digital Conference this year in December. Hopefully, our new president will open the ceremony, and we are very excited on that. And of course, today, this is kickoff of our hopefully series of workshops. So, like Johan said, we're not going to give all the knowledge in one day today, but you have to attend the future ones as well. So it should be exciting. Also, we are currently developing a white paper on carbon market. There is already some documents by IBC, as you probably also read. But I think the white paper that we are writing is more practical knowledge, know-how from the real life developers and markets. So we already interviewed, I think, more than a dozen of carbon project developers, also buyers. So I think we can hear from all angles are to be expected. What are the challenges in the last 3 years, and so on and so on. So as we go along, I think this is, I'm not going to read everything. We're going to have this month a CBAM workshop with WC, in case you guys are interested. I think it's same thing. It's overwhelmed by participants. It's a bit difficult to get the entry. So those are what we have prepared. Next. Let's talk the good stuff now. What is actually the global demand and what the Indonesian potential is given on the table? As you know, on the bottom side, this is actually the NDC target and the baseline emission that Indonesia has lined. 2.8 billion tons until 2030 is the baseline emission, and Pak Rahmat's already in his year already set up the NDC target, which is 26%, Pak Rahmat, or 41, which is the birthday of Pak Rahmat actually. But I think they revise and enhance NDC now to, it's a bit difficult numbers, 31 point something or 32%, and with international support, I think it's close to 42% or something. So in that respect, it calculates around 834 million until 2030, but yearly it's around 83.4 million. Next, please. So this is the follow potential that Prof. Yatna mentioned. We have on the bottom 20 million hectares idle of forest land that unmanned or unlicensed, etc., etc. These are the main cause of forest fires, illegal encroachment, illegal logging, and so on. So until October last year, sorry, July this year, there are already 480 applications, that meaning to go for carbon projects, the new PBPH, that constitutes to 12 million hectares. So conservatively, we calculated that it can deliver 240 million tons per year. So if you just go back and remember 83.4 million tons NDC target per year, we have opportunity around 140 to 150 million tons that we can sell it to the international market with corresponding adjustment. So that is a very good opportunity. But then, of course, in the Q&A, maybe I can answer how we can do it. Next. This is an illustration. Johan mentioned about the pricing. This is the two legacy projects. The left one is the Rimbaraya. The right one is the Katingan. So as you can see, the very bottom color is the market, the current index market of carbon price. This is avoidance, by the way, not removal credits. So it touches almost $1 only. But fortunately, and we have to be proud that both projects, I think, still have an average of $8 at the current vintage. So I think, like Johan said, dedicated project with high quality, with high integrity, especially coming from Indonesia, still far above the index carbon market. That really quite concerning. Next. This is just my last 3 slides. This is just an illustration of the CCS and CCUS projects. Next. So, like Prof. Yatna mentioned, there are already presidential decree regarding this. The green color are already on the ground. The purple one is under development, and the yellow ones are the potential. I will stop there. Maybe already past the 10 minutes. All good? Okay. So maybe I can follow up with the Q&A. Thank you for the attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Riza, for raising our hopes up on carbon market in Indonesia. I hope we can keep the momentum with Pak Dodi and Ibu Yani. So please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think this is FGD session, right? So focus group discussion session. So that's why I don't prepare the slides. But I'm trying to connect what Pak Rahman say, and then Johan, Pak Yatna, and lastly Pak Riza. I think you have everything. So material completed. So you don't need to see other slides unless you have some. Here is first what Pak Rahmat mentioned this morning, that we need to understand from the 0 point why carbon market comes to the floor right now. What's the commitment that international community makes regarding the climate change? Why it's important to have it to support the financial sector that need to be provided for the global climate crisis as well as for the Indonesia target on NDC. So I think a lot of us here have been experienced with the carbon market, even though just scratch. But I see from the morning evaluation, Jeremy point here that some of us is already familiar with the process of the carbon markets. So I don't want to repeat this all, but the thing is, first again, understand the climate change, understands why the market comes to climate change issue, and pointed out the Article 6. So if you follow Article 6, that's actually we need to listen. We need to understand fully what's the difference between 6.2, 6.4, 6.8. So why we differentiate this? Where either 6.2, 6.4, or 6. One more thing, Johan, I would like to mention here that we also have RBP, RDDRB. So you know already that. This is debatable as well. To me, the government seems to be interested in it rather than market. That's why Pak Jatna mentioned that everything seems to be uncompleted yet. We are still process of the carbon markets come to the floor. So why the governments tend to be interested on RBP markets? What's the difference between mandatory and voluntary? Why it seems to me that the governments doesn't would like to engage in voluntary rather than mandatory. So that kind of thing maybe can help us to solve, to advise the government, then the carbon market community as well. But Rahmat mentioned that the next few months we have to get a new government administration. Then that's actually an opportunity to demonstrate to them that this is the biggest opportunity we would like to say about how the market can work at the field level. So, Jan, not just omon. What is omon? Talk only. But we need to, to come to the practice, And, you also mentioned, Johan, that among the international community, Indonesia is left behind in terms of carbon. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's what's happening right now. So I would like you all to contribute here what you're thinking, the government should do, what the community should do. One of the things that Pak Rahmat mentioned that there is a lack of private sector involvement in COP-UNFCCC. So that's why Article 6 right now just start. We know from Durban climate talks that there's nothing to get regarding the carbon market. So how come, we can go on without involvement, active participation from private sector? So I'm very happy when Pak Iza explained that there are actually a lot of concern outside of the box. What happened in Bali to me is attractive and interesting. So how can the Bali conference, Pariza, can bring to the COP29, for instance? So you just contact Paramat how to participate in COP29. So I think that is one of the things, Johan, why, the talks on the carbon market stuck in Durban. No progress at all. So we need to think of that. There are also many challenges that we need to discuss here in this room, because it is more useful to have such a discussion rather than listening something that never move on. What needs to be done? What's handicap so far that we have experienced with the last forest administration, for instance? So if you look at our NDC, there are two giants there: energy and forestry. But Jatnav just mentioned that energy is running well. Why forestry is not run yet? What's happening? So we need to discuss. This is was group discussion that we came up to answer that things. Pareza also mentioned that if we look again to NDC, that we only need 33.4 ton emission reduction, right? But our potential is about 200 to 30 or 200, 240. From only volume, not energy yet. Not yet energy. So how big actually our potential for the carbon market? That kind of thing, actually, we need to discuss this in this room. So with that, I think I stop there. Then I invite all of us, including myself, to discuss this later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ibu Yani.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mbak Ayu. Hello, everyone. I am the last panelist. I hope you are all still awake. But thanks so much to Johan and also Pak Riza and Professor Yana, as well as Pak Dodi. You all make my job easier, because many of what I put it in my slide presentation has been presented by all of you. But talking about this carbon market potential in Indonesia, I've been in renewable energy more than 25 years. I'm one of the founders of Society of Renewable. And since 6 years ago, I told to everyone, including the governments, I am tired and I feel that we do not have hope, because we have abundant resources of our renewable energy. Namely, 40% of geothermal energy resources are here in our country. And also solar, potential solar. Target of government in the renewable energy development in our national energy mix is 23% by 2025. Currently, we only achieve 10.3%. Yeah. They started to invite me to have another discussion to reduce the target. Target is no longer 23%, but perhaps 19%. Some say that 16%. And the minister asked me, what is your opinion? I said, Pak Menteri, you could put 50% target and you will achieve it as long as you issue the attractive policies or conducive policy for private sector to jumping into the sector. Otherwise, kita bawa wacana lagi. Yeah. We
always told to the world that we are rich in renewable resources. What is the use of the resources if you do not utilize it, you know? And that's one. Now I start with my presentation material. I'm going to do in Bahasa. Why? Because majority of the participants are in Bahasa. So in my experience, it will be more effective to talk in Bahasa. Peluang dan tantangan perdagangan karbon di Indonesia, I will skip very fast for things that already presented by previous panelists or speaker. Next, please. So, pasar karbon or bursa karbon, there are two, voluntary and mandatory. Sukarela atau kewajiban ya. Tadi Johan sudah menatarkan lebih detail dari punya saya. Jadi kita kalau nggak ngerti nanti bisa bertanya dengan kita semua belakangan atau nanti tulis email atau WA. Jadi ini memberi peluang kepada swasta untuk berpartisipasi dalam mengurangi emisi karbon yang di atmosfer. Kenapa? Sangat mengerikan. Itu kalau slide saya ada dikasih animasi, itu asap dari satu mesin itu menggebu-gebu keluar gitu loh. Itu yang menjadi tantangan dunia. Nah, saya mau ceritakan 1 bulan yang lalu saya kembali dari Halmahera. Di sana langit bersih, hijau, biru, awan putih. 8 jam kemudian saya mendarat di Soekarno-Hatta. Langitnya abu-abu pekat dan itu polusi. Teman saya American dan British kerja untuk World Bank dan juga ADB dan juga untuk USAID. Ketika Februari polusi Jakarta sangat-sangat mengkhawatirkan, sangat tinggi dibanding allowance dari FAO. Mereka disuruh pulang oleh bos-bosnya karena mereka punya anak kecil yang tinggal di sini nggak sehat buat otak mereka. Oke, next please. Lalu yang pasar yang wajib. Nah, diatur oleh tadi NDC, National Determined Contribution dari negara. Tadi yang Indonesia itu sudah committed untuk menurunkan 2,8 miliar CO2 equivalent emisi pada tahun 2030. Next. Tolong lanjut slide-nya. Lalu ini tadi juga cap and trade sudah diterangkan oleh Johan secara detail. Saya nggak akan mengulas lagi karena ini dilaporkan setiap akhir periode ya kan. Dan lanjutkan please. Kemudian ya setiap akhir periode dilaporkan. Kemudian juga ada sistem atau modality yang dipakai yaitu European Union Emission Trading System. Ini sistem yang berlaku di Eropa di mana pasar karbon yang terbesar di dunia saat ini ya ini di Eropa. Silakan lanjut. Yang kontrol siapa Mbak Vina? Oke. Ini juga dilanjut aja. Ya, tadi saya sudah katakan kalau udah committed mengurangi dikasih kayak di Singapura tuh udah dikasih tahu perusahaan yang mengeluarkan emisi dikasih tahu berapa mereka harus menurunkan dan kalau nggak tercapai penurunannya mereka akan dikasih denda gitu loh. Nah, saya mau nyatakan perkembangan pasar karbon di Indonesia tadi Pak Riza dan juga Profesor Yatna sudah nyampaikan sudah ditentukan dinaikkan nilai ekonomi karbon atau NEC yaitu nilai terhadap setiap unit emisi gas rumah kaca yang dihasilkan dari kegiatan manusia atau kegiatan ekonomi. Ini diatur oleh dua kebijakan yaitu Perpres 98 tahun 2021. Tolong baca pasal 1 dan ayat 1. Kemudian Permen KLK 21 tahun 2022 ini juga pasal 1 dan ayat 1. Kalau nggak punya Perpres dan permennya nanti saya sediakan di Nayan. Silakan. Lanjut. Ini dasar hukum tadi sudah diterangkan oleh Profesor Yana juga sudah sampaikan, tapi saya ingin mengulas yang paling bawah yaitu NDC kita. Jadi National Determined Contribution Indonesia berkomitmen untuk mengurangi pada tahun 2030 31,89% emisi CO2 kita dengan usaha sendiri. Kemudian 43,2% dari kalau ada kontribusi dari internasional atau bantuan global gitu ya. Silakan lanjut supaya enggak berlama-lama. Nah, ini perkembangan regulasi tadi juga disinggung, yang di bawah yang saya bundarkan itu ada beberapa regulasi lagi yang under preparations. Ada yang oleh KLHK, ada yang 2 dari KLHK, ada juga dari Mendagri juga ada ya. Lalu juga ada dari ini yang penting buat banyak pelaku bisnis adalah dari Kemenku. Ya, ini ada pertemuan beberapa kali tapi belum tercapai keputusan terakhir. Silakan lanjut. Nah, untuk mekanisme dari NEC ini yang perlu diingat juga ada 2 cara, yaitu memitigasi. Jadi tadinya punya PLTU tapi ingin di co-firingin itu juga bisa berkurang juga ya, 10% misalnya. Atau mau merubah dari fossil base, mungkin PLTD dirubah di sana ada hidro atau mikro hydro atau run of river ya seperti PLTMH ya. Atau pakai PLTBM dengan biomasa atau juga menggunakan sampah kota untuk dijadikan listrik dari gas metan yang dihasilkan. Ibu-ibu dan bapak-bapak yang ada di sini, saya ingin menekankan yang harus kita perjuangkan semua. Saat ini, beberapa tahun ini, renewable yang berpotensi untuk dikembangkan itu hanya city waste for energy, sampah kota untuk 8 kota, sekarang diperpanjang jadi 12 kota. Kenapa? Karena tahun 2017 Presiden melaunch Perpres, harga listriknya Rp800 per kilowatt hour, lalu PLN wajib membeli listriknya. Yang lain, yang ada harganya tuh selling price. Lalu kemudian ada hal lain yang harus dipatuhi atau diikuti, kuota dari PLN di RUPTL-nya PLN. Jadi kalau mau mengembangkan ground mounted PLTS di Jambi, lihat dulu RUPTL-nya PLN, ada nggak kuotanya di situ? Kemudian setelah itu nggak bisa langsung lalu datang ke PLN, ya saya mau tekan PPA, gitu, Power Purchase Agreement, nggak bisa. Ini selling price, jadi bidding dulu. Kalau enggak PLN takut ditangkap KPK gitu loh. Nah, ini yang bikin frustasi karena bidding menunggu yang ada yang masuk lagi itu bisa 1,5 tahun, bisa 1 tahun, makanya nggak jalan. Dulu sebelum tahun 2017 kita punya feeding tarif. Jadi enggak banyak utility company yang datang ke Indonesia sebelum tahun 2017 mengajarkan kita. Kalau mau renewable energy berkembang, kemampuan pemerintah dan BUMN terbatas. Oleh karena itu, masukkan swasta ke dalam. Karena kalau BUMN, pemerintah, lending, limitnya mereka juga terbatas gitu loh. Nah untuk itu, hindarkan tarif itu dinegosiasiin. Karena tarif negosiasi itu very time consuming and very costly. Tapi tahun 2017, feeding tarif kita dihapus oleh Bapak Menteri kita saat itu. Setelah itu, renewable nggak jalan. Next please. Lalu ini prosedurnya, saya juga sudah bisa katakan. Jadi saya sekarang ada proyek dengan klien saya, itu hutan yang luar biasa luasnya. Ini pengusaha hanya menjadikan hutan itu untuk ditanam pohon, tidak untuk energy forest, tidak untuk HTI, production forest, betul-betul untuk jualan karbon, ya kan? Jadi saya usulkan mereka, mari kita bikin previsibility tadi dulu supaya bisa ada keputusan go or no go. Saya milih site yang saya pikir yang lebih sedikit tantangannya. Kemudian setelah itu feasibility tadi lalu harus menyiapkan drum ya. Nah, ini nanti divalidasi oleh ada organisasi atau perusahaan yang menjadi validator yang sudah diakui oleh nanti saya tayangkan siapa saja mereka. Oke, langsung lagi. Lalu contoh ya. Inisiatif ini salah satu dari FOLU, jadi Forest and Other Long Use Carbon Business atau Project gitu ya. Ada dua nih contohnya, satu pertanian yang terintegrasi, yaitu pertanian yang misalnya dia environmentally friendly dan socially responsible agriculture business gitu loh. Dia tidak pakai pupuk kimia, dia tidak pakai pestisida dan tidak membabat pohon. Setengah itu dia selangin dengan pohon-pohon sehingga tidak terjadi misalnya longsor dan banjir gitu. Sehingga bagian atas dari tanah yaitu topnya itu yang rata-rata lebih subur, tidak digerus oleh air. Seperti yang saya lihat, saya diminta tolong maju di Pak Energi di Dieng, di mana kayu semua dipangkas, sudah digantikan dengan tanaman kentang. Itu mereka sudah betul-betul langganan dengan banjir dan longsor. Dan setiap tahun Baduk Merican itu harus menggeruk sedimen yang datang dari pegunungan Dieng itu 2 juta kubik per tahun. Itu adalah bagian tanah yang subur. Lalu kedua ada gedung hijau, green building. Itu rumah sakit kalau nggak salah, rumah sakit Indrawati. Jadi dia ganti semua perangkat listriknya dengan yang lebih efisien. Next please. Ini saya nggak akan menangani, ini khusus untuk pembangkit listrik. Next, bisa nanti kita diskusi. Nah ini dia. Potensi peserta perdagangan karbon itu ada warna-warni, yang gelap warnanya itu adalah PLTU non mulut tambang, yang lebih besar kapasitasnya 400 megawatt. Lalu PLTU non mulut tambang lagi antara 100 sampai 400 megawatt itu yang hijau, lalu yang kuning yaitu PLTU di mulut tambang. Ya, yang mulut tambangnya lebih sedikit. Itu tahun 2023 yang di mulut tambang 1,7 gigawatt, yang size-nya antara 100 sampai 400 megawatt itu ada 12,9 gigawatt, yang yang size lebih besar dari 400 gigawatt yang gelap warnanya itu sekitar 18,8 gigawatt. Itu PLTU yang berjanji untuk mengurangi emisinya. Di 2024 juga sama, itu dilihat aja. Saya nggak mau panjang-panjang, tapi itu kondisi yang dicatat di lembaga registrasi kita. Silakan lagi. Terima kasih, tapi saya mau lanjutkan dengan slide berikutnya lalu tentang verifikasi. Tunggu dulu, yang tadi sebelum ini. Ya. Untuk ibu-ibu dan bapak-bapak, kalau ingin melihat situs registrasi nasional, kita bukalah website ini. Saat ini yang udah terdaftar 3.800 proyek, ya kan? Tapi bila ibu bapak lihat teliti satu persatu, banyak yang di dalamnya tuh benar-benar ini kita kurang sosialisasi. Kenapa? Ada solar water pump kecil sekali, ada rooftop yang hanya kecil di bangunan Pemda dapat, tapi masuk di sini. Jadi apa? Padahal biaya untuk membuat ini bisa dipasarkan itu mahal. Kita harus nyewa konsultan, nyewa verifikatornya gitu loh ya. Next please. Jadi ini PR kita semua ya. Kemudian ini lembaga validasi dan verifikasi yang sudah di-approve secara nasional. Satu PT Mutu Agung Lestari, lalu PT TUF 2, ada PT TUF Rhineland Indonesia dan PT TUF North Indonesia. Saya kerjasama dengan salah satu mereka. Lalu PT Skupindo, kemudian ada 5 ya, PT Adriaya Bumi Lestari. Di belakang di slide saya nanti slide-nya dibagikan kepada bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu. Masing-masing role dan tugasnya ini ada beda-bedanya dikit. Banyak ada yang bedanya banyak gitu loh. Jadi saya sudah sampaikan di slide berikutnya masing-masing mereka mencakup apa aja. Coba tayangin satu aja. Nah itu Muti Agung dalam verifikasi mereka lakukan apa, validasinya apa, kemudian verifikasi laporannya bagaimana gitu ya. Dan ini nggak gratis, kita harus bayar. Developer project harus membayar. Jadi kalau kecil sekali proyeknya, satu siapa yang mau beli, kedua membayar konsultan juga susah. Jadi tidak berlama lagi supaya waktu bertanya jawab dengan semua ahli dan Pak Johan banyak. Saya sudahi presentasi saya atau bicara saya. Terima kasih atas perhatian dan sukses dengan bisnisnya. Kita harus berjuang untuk supaya Indonesia itu betul-betul national energy security-nya terjamin. Untuk itu apa? Manfaatkanlah renewable energy secepat-cepatnya. Kita nggak bisa tergantung lihat minyak. Orang tua saya nggak nyangka kalau tahun 2004 Indonesia sudah jadi net importer minyak. Makin ke sini makin banyak minyak yang kita impor. Hati-hati dengan batu bara. Dengan cara mengekspor kayak sekarang, ntar lagi juga kita habis batu bara, lalu pakai apa? Kasihan anak cucu. Sekian, terima kasih. Saya nggak nakut-nakutin. Saya ini adalah betul-betul mengamati dengan detail. Makasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for amazing panelists. It's really inspiring, right? And I hope it's give you more clearance and clarification on how carbon market evolved in Indonesia. I know that you have a lot of questions, but to put the tense down a little bit and give you more time to craft your questions, I would like to ask one question to all panelists. If you have answer, please feel free to speak. In area, we're also doing a regional analysis on carbon market for ASEAN plus region, usually ASEAN plus 6. And Indonesia is always like a puzzle. And one of the questions that stood out was when we see the number of average carbon price in Indonesia. I think it's in primary market, it is around, it's less than $2, and for secondary, it's less than $5. I was just wondering where these numbers come from. That's one question. And the second one, I believe that one of the reasons why carbon market is now gaining momentum in Indonesia because we have enhanced our NDC and we have increased the target. Again, where these numbers come from. So maybe Prof. Rahmat also can shed light on this question if you would like. And yeah, for the panelists, if you have any comments, please feel free.
Thank you. I think regarding the price, I'm not sure that the Indonesia's index or Indonesian government is really particular in setting the index or the average price, because I think it's still mixed between renewable energy, follow sectors, etc., etc. You know that even the finance minister setting up. Originally, she set up a carbon tax minimum, or they call it the floor price, which is a bit confusing. It's only what, 30,000 rupiah, something around less than $2, right? So all the IPP that I met, which is mostly coal-fired power plants, said, I better pay. It's so cheap, you know, less than $2, rather than buying carbon offsets that might be over $14 per ton. As simple as that. And that creates a very mixed signals, especially for the carbon market in Indonesia, that I think, especially for FOLU, a bit concerning. So who will then buy the FOLU carbon offsets from Indonesia? That's number one. Number two, I think there is also a bit of a mixed understanding and mixed confusion amongst ourselves, including our government. Because I think I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Rahmat, that I haven't seen any articles within the Paris Agreement that says achieving NDC must be paid or must be done by countries' own people. I haven't seen any articles that say that. Meaning, if you sell your voluntary carbon offsets to the market, it can contribute your NDC. So that is actually the advantage of Indonesia. Without making too much effort by making the domestic market because I see still the lack of understanding in one side. Number two, I think, of course, the industry still make excuses to pay carbon offsets for reaching their net zero target because there is no incentive, number one. Number two, there's no pressures also. I think we need to replicate what has been going on in the developed countries. There are no regulations that requires the industry to follow or to pay carbon obligation. But there are pressures from stockholders. There are pressures from the funders, the financial institutions. Private equities like BlackRock do not want to finance or fund projects that are dirty and also don't have net zero emission portfolio. Very clear. But if you go to Indonesian financial sectors, they're still confused. They don't understand what net zero emission target is. They just go for profit. So that's probably, hopefully that's answer number one. Number two, regarding enhanced NDC, that's Pak Rahman's maybe better answer that. But I think what I can a bit share, well, it's a quite challenging and interesting approach. But any countries in the world that I know that already set up an end target, I think it shows to the world that they are very serious. Maybe that's from me. Maybe Pak Rahmat can answer.
For the most part, things have been answered by Lisa himself. What I was talking when I was on the platform was that we should increase the participation of the private sector, and that will make everything better because the public sector or the government was not. I'm sorry, I was in the government, but I'm not in government now. Was not interested in all this, what we're talking about. That's why I come here to boost up and to enhance your efforts. The enhanced NDCs is also a target, and thank you for reminding me of my birthday. My birthday was the original NDC, the high NDC, and it became the NDC because it has to be enhanced. I have no answer for this because I'm not the government. I wouldn't venture to answer that. Thank you.
Okay, do we have questions? Oh, okay. Pak Dodi. Okay. Do you have questions or input from the participants committee? I can walk actually. It's okay. Okay. Sorry. Back there. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we have 3 for the first round. 3 questions. If you want to speak in Indonesian, that's okay, or in mixed English and Indonesian, it's also fine. This is FGD, so make it more fluid.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Thank you for the chance. I'm Arif, representing my uni from Pakuan University, Bogor. I thought I just have a simple question regarding the presentations, which were delivered by, I thought, more two presenters, mostly focusing on the clearance of regulation. For instance, I got also an interest from candidate investor, which is like really looking for a kind of clearness from the regulations of being able to start blue carbon project investment in the country, but they are quite reluctant to begin due to the presence of the regulation. It seems like too complicated. So I just suggested like to wait, or is there any kind of approach to start the project, the mangrove blue carbon project as soon as possible, without waiting further about when the regulation will be perfect, maybe something like that. So thank you.
For the panelists, if you have the answer, please.
Maybe, should I answer right away?
If you can answer right now, it's good.
Okay, this is my approach actually, because I have carbon projects myself, and investors that came to me, I challenged them actually, because if you look at the umbrella of the presidential decree, it does not restrict any international trading. It does not restrict whatsoever about voluntary carbon market as well. But unfortunately, of course, with all due respect, Pak Rahmat, government everywhere works very slow. I work with the US government. They work very slow as well. It's not just the Indonesian government. So when they implement a decree into more detailed fieldwork regulations, that is the challenge. And I think they always have excuse that they have priorities, right? So my challenge to the investor, I said, look, let's just sign a term sheet or a commitment or whatever. If you want to come in and engage with me, let's do it now. And subject to, hopefully the new government in October will much better. If they don't, then you're not losing any money at all. So at least that can give an assurance that your projects can go. Who knows? That term sheet you can bring to some family office or something in Indonesia and say, look, I already got commitment from this guy. Can you fund my my project? And believe me, I did that and it works. So that's probably my tips. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if other panelists has other comments to add on.
Thank you. I think that Pak Riza mentioned because he has experience, right? But you know what's happened, that regulation is always there. And as Pak Reza mentioned previously, that integrity is a very important, ya, Pak. Sometimes, you know, since the capacity is not there, so better to delay because they are afraid of this, you know. I think sometimes like that. So, but I think Pak Riza experience, I think is really good. That they have to be brave enough to, because you know what the regulation is. So then really, you really need to know. As I mentioned that there are so many now is harmonization, what you call it, and then discussion, how that interdepartment discussion and so on and so on. That really take a time, of course, right? So you cannot just, you know, the world is already moving very fast, but the government has to be, really has to be very careful, because that once already there, without careful thinking, I think that's going to be a disaster in the future without that. And maybe the market will not be good enough. But with this kind of, maybe it takes time a little bit. But as I see that maybe the new government maybe that will be changes very fast. So that I don't have any good answer for that. But Odi?
Very short, but don't think that everyone's the same. Look, for example, regulations made by Ministry of Forestry and Environment is a bit different with what's Menko Marquez, for instance. There are different views on the carbon markets, and then what should be done here and there. IDX is there, but why is very quiet? So don't think that the top level of decision makers are the same. First. Secondly, even in the same minister, there are differences. Don't think that Directorate General PPI and Directorate General PHL are the same. By they request to make a regulation at different level. So that's something that I can share with you. Thank you.
Yeah, this is my comment. This is from last week interaction with some friends at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. The ministry also currently prepare the regulations on the international carbon market mechanism. So if you ask me, the regulation is in preparation state at the moment. Hopefully they could do it, as fast as we expected. I just give you another example. Singapore government, a Singapore utility company would like to purchase 4 gigawatt renewable energy from Indonesia. So several large-scale companies are really enthusiastic to supply green electricity from PV ground-mounted. Yeah, they try to look for the land to put together the ground-mounted PV, and everything, and they just sign MOU with those utility company in Singapore. And then what happened? The statement like, we are not allowed to export the renewables before the local consumption is fulfilled. So Antaro Archipelago. And then again, there is a regulation again, or you are not allowed to be, a private sector not allowed to build a submarine under submarine cable. That it got to be done by government or state-owned company. So that's kind of thing. Without regulation is, a bit too risky if we encourage you to, move on. And in the end, your friend or private sector who work with you, perhaps one day will be disappointed with you. So just slow down and then try to communicate with, for example, Pak Eko from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Dia sekretaris dari Ibu Laksmi, dirjennya gitu ya. And you will know exactly when, the needed regulation will be issued. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bapak Ibu. I'm pretty sure you have other burning questions, but we only can take 2 more questions because of time restriction. Okay. One question, other. Okay. Let's try one time. 1, 2, 3. Raise your hand.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Andreas Utahayan. I'm from the Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment, and actually I'm working for Blue Carbon since 2011. So, but before the issue of the FOLU, something like that, rise. So I have a comment, maybe question also. First, regarding the carbon market. Yes, I think if you compare the energy sector and the FOLU, the energy sector quite go further. And we could, I think it's very important for us also to analyze why the energy sector can go that fast compared to the follow. I think one of the issue is the variety of the stakeholders. The energy sectors, usually the key players is only not many companies. But the follow, there are a lot of companies. And as well, the regulation involved with different stakeholders, especially when we are thinking about the local community people. Usually, they are really attached to the follow issue rather than to the energy issue. But doesn't mean the energy issue doesn't have a concern on the local community. I think this is one of the reasons why the energy sector could go further compared to the forestry or follow sector. And the second of the thing is regarding the follow. During the last few years, many people also after the Glasgow meeting, the issue regarding the follow or blue carbon becoming, I don't know, getting very hot. And many people are coming to Indonesia asking how we could able to help Indonesia for approach for getting or to achieve the NDC target or other things. But the time's coming, and up to now, till the regulation is not yet clear. But if we are talking about the opportunity, there are opportunities. Because when we are doing the follow sector, actually carbon itself is just one of the ecosystem services provided by the ecosystem. There are other ecosystem services that could have much larger benefit than the carbon itself that people are missing here. So again, if you have a project regarding the follow, for example, doing the restoration, something like that, of the mangrove or seagrass ecosystem, it takes years before you can able to sell anyway. So just start the project, because I mean, you need years. I believe in the next 1 or 2 years, there will be a good regulation issued by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry regarding the follow sector. But by the time, you already miss 2 years or 3 years. So, and also people thinking about the scale has to be 1,000, 3,000, 10,000, 100,000 hectares. Which is, to my understanding, because I'm working on the field, just 1,000 or just 100 hectares for restoration is a big effort. So just remember, you need to have local people who work on this. You have to have a nursery to have the seed, and then starting to plant, and then measuring in regular way. So the sooner the better for starting the issue of the follow. I think this is just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Probably Ibu Yani would like to give comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Pa Andreas. I'm fully agree with you. Although that, a couple hundred hectare or 1,000 hectare, but you could bundling it together with others. But the point is, when I work with this investor for sustainable forest project, he really occupied a huge, the IUP-nya very huge, Pak. That what I really recommend to them, I'm really concerned about the community not far from the forest. Please, please give them space to really harvest the non-timber product, non-timber forest product, such as honey or rattan, and we help them to really make in such a way that the honey could be, produced or packaging on such a way that we could link them up to the international market as well as the rattan. Once I really, my boss recommended me to really invited the designer from the Philippines for rattan related products, because they could sell the product to Louis Vuitton and something like that, So this kind of thing, we really need to give additional input to our client. So in addition, we could help the local people to improve their livelihood. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you are right, Andres, that it's not as easy as it seems because of characteristics of the object. Energy is clear. Forestry is complicated. My previous professor, Professor Dudung, mentioned that actually the value of forest, 90% of the forest is not timber, but non-timber, including carbon. So that's why you are right that I agree with you that we go back to the real accounting of the value. Then non-forest product is much bigger value compared to timber.
One more thing, make sure that 2 times 7 years, this investor not allowed to cut the trees. Yeah. If they really want to sell the carbon. Thank you.
Pak Andreas is the blue carbon researcher. I know that his paper, Indonesia has 3 million hectares of mangrove, yeah, Pak Andreas. And I think the ecosystem services, as he mentioned, not only those, but also biodiversity. That was really because energy, maybe that's really clear enough, but it's so complicated in the forestry of Volu because of those not only trees, but also below the ground. Especially the mangrove is below the ground. There's so many, soil organics stock carbon there is even higher than the tropical forest. It's 4-5 times the mangrove areas. So I think, yes, we really need to pay attention to that. But also at the same time, that also we really need to know the communities there, as you mentioned, that it's really a very sensitive issue that we really need to be addressed. But also, for example, how that really related to disaster. There's so many possible disasters, if you don't really clear enough. That's why I think the experience for Pariza he has done, I think that has to be disseminated, right? So that really, how that really, we don't want to reinvent the wheel again, We really need to experience in Indonesia because Pariza and many others, Pak siapa yang di belakang tadi, Pak Handoko and many others already have experienced that. I think what we need is talk about that and disseminated experience. The do and the don't, right? That's really important. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you so much, Bapak Ibu. Now we're moving on to the last questions. Appreciate if only one panelist to answer the question. Apologies for, the rush because of time limit.
Ya, terima kasih atas waktunya. Selamat siang semuanya. Perkenalkan, nama saya Pak Syah, saya dari PT Natur Trust Verifikator Indonesia. Untuk saat ini kami sedang mengajukan ke KAN untuk dalam proses tahap akreditasi sebagai lembaga validasi dan verifikasi. Semoga kedepannya dari kami bisa ikut berkontribusi di dunia karbon di Indonesia. Baik, ada sedikit pertanyaan. Mungkin ini saya tujukan ke Bu Yani, atau mungkin nanti dari panelis lain akan memberikan komentar terhadap pertanyaan saya. Jadi tadi disampaikan bahwa eh, dua sektor terbesar untuk saat ini di Indonesia yang akan diprioritaskan di NDC adalah sektor energi dan juga sektor volume. Berbicara di sektor energi, tadi sudah dijelaskan bahwa sebagian besar untuk saat ini pembahasannya hanya pada di sektor di hulunya. Namun kita juga jangan lupa bahwa untuk saat ini di sektor hilir juga perlu kita diskusikan bahwa untuk konsumsi dari energi terutama listrik di Indonesia ini juga cukup tinggi ya. Dan untuk saat ini memang untuk kebutuhan di sektor energi masih ditopang oleh pembangkit listrik tenaga uap batu bara. Sejauh yang saya tahu, mohon maaf nanti mungkin bisa dikoreksi kalau misalkan salah. Untuk saat ini sumber daya yang paling efektif untuk menghasilkan energi salah satunya adalah batu bara selain dengan nuklir terutama. Nah, untuk renewable energi yang lain seperti surya mungkin atau panas bumi itu sangat memberikan apa ya? Kalau misalkan surya itu sendiri mereka butuh area yang cukup luas untuk bisa memenuhi kebutuhan energi yang ada di Indonesia.
Pertanyaannya apa, Mas?
Ya. Ini terus
biar
untuk pertanyaannya,
cepet aja.
ya, untuk pertanyaannya Pak, apakah boleh untuk saat ini kita optimis terhadap teknologi yang ada, terus dengan renewable energi yang ada untuk memenuhi seluruh kebutuhan energi yang ada di Indonesia, terutama dengan teknologi yang ada, terus renewable teknologi yang ada nantinya yang mungkin akan didaftarkan di SRN, apakah itu semua bisa untuk memenuhi konsumsi dari energi terutama listrik yang ada di Indonesia apabila nantinya mungkin PLTU batu bara akan ditutup atau dengan tren penggunaan listrik yang besar ke depannya seperti penggunaan mobil listrik atau motor listrik ke depannya kan juga semakin besar seperti itu. Mungkin itu saja pertanyaan dari
satu
saya.
lagi
Terima
tadi
kasih.
biar sekalian Pak Andoko kali ya, tadi udah angkat tangan.
Okay, this is a
It's just for then we can answer both together.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So that was a very interesting discussion. I really got a lot. One of the things that we want to know, it's basically because of the hardness of this cap and trade and also corresponding adjustment. That's why a lot of the players like us, we want to move to corresponding. We want to move away from corresponding adjustment, but to voluntary market. And I agree totally with Pak Riza that basically corresponding adjustment and this voluntary, it does not really affect the NDC. However, when we're looking at the pricing, we're only going to be talking about carbon from the, I would say, the climate section. Tetapi yang paling penting di sini, in order for us to value those things, there's also the community and also the biodiversity part. And that what makes the change from $3 to become $8, $4 to become $15. Nah, yang saya ingin tahu dari pihak negara atau juga dari pihak DIPI ataukah juga dari Yayasan Bina Lingkungan Usaha Lingkungan dan juga dari university, is there anything that is being done by our country not just to focus on the calculation part, on the climate, but also ada impact langsung terhadap community and biodiversity, which creates a unique selling point and value to our projects in Indonesia? Thank you.
Okay, maybe I can answer both.
one answer to one question, ya Pak.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Number one, maybe Bu Yani can elaborate. The way that I know, I'm not an energy guy, but I know because I was trying to develop one biomass power plant in the early days, but unfortunately unsuccessful. But there's a mixed energy concept within the Ministry of Energy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bu Yani. So mixed energy concept ini memang harus diterapkan. But personally, I don't think coal will disappear. I don't think oil will disappear. because there's too much investment already and too many trickle down effects that creates the whole ecosystem. So meaning this is a window opportunity for carbon offsets. So Pak Handoko can sell carbon offsets to those emitters. Let the coal-fired power plant be coal-fired power plant with efficiency in such a way that they can do in maximum way. That's number one. Number two, Pak Handoko, I think as IDCTA, we also advise the new presidential team, and currently they are preparing a draft for revision of the presidential decree that includes the co-benefits and biodiversity credits. So hopefully we are exploring optimally, not just from climate sectors only, calculating the carbon yield, but also achieving optimally on the co-benefits and also biodiversity.
Thank you so much, Pak Handoko and also Pasha. Regarding Pasha dulu ya, tanya tadi dalam bahasa Indonesia, saya jawab dalam bahasa Indonesia. Apakah bisa teknologi lokal kita agar kita dapat membangun listrik atau kebutuhan energi kita dengan renewable? Saya ditanyakan, dipanggil Pak Erik saya, karena ada surat dari satu profesor ke presiden untuk agar negara ini tidak mengisu polusi yang atraktif untuk solar PV. Saya dipanggil, disuruh berkomentar. Intinya saya gini, Pak, saya kenal dengan teman Bapak yang uangnya triliunan. Saya pernah tanya dia mau nggak investasi untuk modul surya di Indonesia. Ngapain, Bu? Saya mau jual kemana? 2021 akhir itu kapasitas production modulnya China 400 gigawatt annually. Nggak ada satu negara pun di dunia yang bisa compete dengan China, produk China. Kalau kita mau bikin di negeri ini, industri dasar kita tuh belum siap. Jadi banyak raw materialnya harus kita import, pasti lebih mahal. Lalu kalau saya mau jualan di lokal, berapa kapasitas lokal? Kata Pak Erik ke saya, kata teman Bu Yani, 1,2 gigawatt per tahun. Nggak ada. Nggak ada yang invest untuk ground mounted. Ini saya mau share lagi, tapi tidak memaksa bapak-bapak jadi luntur semangat ya. Ini PR buat kita semua. Cirata floating PV, semua orang bangga, saya tidak. Saya tahu prosesnya dari 2017. Itu bisa dibangun karena apa? Dia harus bermitra dengan salah satu subsidiarinya PLN, lalu PJB dapat saham 51% tanpa inject equity. Siapa yang mau? Ya, itu ya. Jadi pertanyaannya gini, industri lokal bisa berkembang kalau ada demand lokal. Demand lokalnya nggak ada, ya, karena bisnisnya nggak berkembang. Itu jawaban saya. Tadi pertanyaan lagi, siapa yang menetapkan harga dari karbon Indonesia kok cuma 30.000 sekian gitu ya? Itu menandakan ke kita lobby siapa yang lebih efektif. Lobby polluter, ya, lobby kita ngalah. Itu PR juga buat kita semua. Jangan putus asa. Kemudian tadi Pak Handoko menanyakan ketika mau mengisu satu policy, entah untuk volume kayak untuk apa aja, apakah benefit untuk community and other benefit, misalnya externality atau apa gitu dipikirkan? Jawabannya tidak. Saya pernah ikut di rapat itu 2 kali, nggak ada terlintas. Jangankan itu ya, saya pun merasa bersalah. Baru sekarang saya memikirkan apa sih benefitnya untuk masyarakat. Satu sebetulnya adalah kalau masyarakat diberikan juga benefit dari reforestasi itu gitu ya, kayak misalnya memanen non-timber forest product yang nanti tumbuh di hutan itu, paling kurang dia tidak mengganggu, membabat hutan atau pohon yang harus membuat, yang nanti akan bikin sakit kepala investor gitu ya. Itu, jadi selama saya ngikut 2 kali, saya nggak lihat itu dibicarakan. Terima kasih.
Okay, probably we would like also to hear some guidance from Johan for comments that have been circulated during Q&A. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. First, I'll just reply to you, Dolly. I don't think Indonesia is lagging behind. I think I see Indonesia as part of a group of countries in Southeast Asia that is actually moving. That said, Indonesia has its challenges. That's another thing. Very interesting discussion. I can pick up, for instance, on this discussion on where you only have a price you're only rewarded for the emission reduction, but not the community benefits, the social development, those other issues. And this is something we see in other countries. And at our company, we have developed national frameworks for international carbon markets for few countries in Africa. And one thing we see is that the easiest way for them to engage is to make use of these independent carbon standards. So allow both voluntary carbon market, but also ITMO projects using Verra or gold standard or something like that. The key thing is then when these projects are validated and when they are verified, what do the verifiers look at? Well, they look at the emission reductions. So in some cases, the countries want something more, and we also propose that you can have an extra layer of control of those projects. But that means you have to monitor other aspects of the project. It means unless this is picked up more by Verra and gold standard and these standards, more of a government intervention. And some do not like that government intervention. So how to solve this is something to be discussed for sure. The second point, I don't agree 100% with you, Pakrisa, about the involvement of government. I think it's a little bit back and forth. Yes, investors like BlackRock and others, what they now require that their investments to be green, sustainable, etc. But it also comes because in some countries you also have requirements for companies to have a report on their corporate social responsibility, etc. So I think it's a two-way, but I certainly agree that governments should set the frameworks and not go into too much detail, but let the companies do what they're good at, and they solve the problems if they have the frameworks and the incentives, they will solve these problems. Yeah, I think that's it. So I think very interesting. I would like to hear more about the regulation that the MOEF is working on at some point, but not now. But yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So, and just maybe a final point regarding the presentation that I made earlier today. That was really a helicopter view, a screening, an overview of what is all about. And what we will do, as Jeremy also said before here, we will dig into the details of this as we go ahead with this workshop series. So I think that's it from mine. Thank you very much for very exciting.
Thank you so much, Johan, and all distinguished panelists. Before I give the floor back to committee, please allow me to give a little bit concluding remarks that we need to stay hopeful for a carbon market in Indonesia because, again, carbon pricing policies are not a standalone initiative to address the climate crisis. Putting a price tag on carbon, like standing on the shoulders of giants, enhance Indonesia over climate commitments. Carbon pricing becomes a net incentive to help communities choose low carbon products by leveling the playing field between fossil fuels and clean technology solutions. Only by doing so will existing climate policies such as feed-in tariffs and tax breaks become more effective in accelerating decarbonization targets in Indonesia. Can we have another more round of applause for all distinguished panelists, for participants, and of course, can we have photo session here probably, and then with all participants?
So we can like have please
Give it to committee
for all the panelists. We can have. Can we have like a take photo together from all the panelists in this stage? Yeah. From this side first.
I think let's do to take first all panelists here, photographer here, and then okay.